the price of being perfect, when Menglong's smile became his burden. There was always something almost supernatural about Menglong's smile. It wasn't just charm, it was a performance, a promise, a silent reassurance to the millions who adored him that everything was fine. But behind that perfect curve of his lips lay the cost of perfection itself, one that slowly consumed him until there was nothing left to give. Menglong's death shook an entire generation, not only because of who he was, but because of how little anyone truly knew about the man behind the mask. To the world, he was radiant, an actor, singer, and symbol of gentle strength. But to those who looked closely, the light in his eyes had long begun to dim. In every interview, every photo shoot, every fan meeting, he was flawless. The boy who never lost composure, the artist who never disappointed, the man who always smiled. Yet, behind closed doors, perfection became his prison. It started, perhaps, with small sacrifices, skipping meals before shoots, sleeping only a few hours between projects, agreeing to every request, no matter how unreasonable, because saying no meant appearing ungrateful. The entertainment industry adored him for his professionalism, his fans for his warmth. But what no one realized was that Menglong was quietly erasing himself, piece by piece, to live up to a standard no human could survive. His team used to say he had the kindest heart in the room. He never complains, one stylist once said, recalling late-night sessions after endless promotional tours. Even when his eyes were red from exhaustion, he'd just say, "It's okay. Let's finish strong." But those who truly knew him could sense something deeper, a quiet ache hiding behind his gentleness. In his final months, those closest to him noticed subtle changes. He laughed less during rehearsals. He avoided mirrors longer than before. And when he smiled, it no longer reached his eyes. His perfection, once effortless, had become an unbearable costume. The world demanded more appearances, more emotions, more of him. The more he gave, the less he seemed to exist. His identity was consumed by the version the world loved. He became his brand, his roles, his image. And in that transformation, the real Menglong began to fade away. He once wrote in his private notes, "The world only claps for the mask, but I don't remember how to take it off anymore." Those words, later found by someone close to him, would become hauntingly prophetic. Fame, for you, was never a playground. It was a stage of expectations built on fragile silence. Every move he made was scrutinized, every smile analyzed. The internet adored him, yet the same love became a mirror that distorted him. When fans idolized his perfection, they unknowingly deepened his loneliness. Because no matter how hard he tried, perfection is never enough. He lived a life where vulnerability was a liability. Tears were rehearsed for the screen, but never in real life. Even when his soul screamed for rest, his body performed. Even when his heart begged to stop pretending, he couldn't risk letting anyone down. Those who worked with him in his final project described an unsettling calmness. He seemed detached, not rude, not cold, just distant. He often stared into nothing during breaks, lost in a silence that no one dared to disturb. When asked if he was okay, he would simply say, "I'm fine. I just need to be perfect one more time." That "one more time" became the phrase he repeated most in his last weeks. He smiled through pain. He performed through exhaustion. He appeared on screen as a symbol of light while drowning in shadows no one could see. The night before his death, the staff recalled him sitting quietly on set after everyone left. The lights were still glowing on the empty stage. He sat there for nearly an hour, just staring at the empty chairs where fans would usually cheer. A faint smile crossed his lips, gentle, tired, almost peaceful. No one knew it was goodbye. Later that night, he returned home alone. His phone, as found later, had dozens of unread messages from friends, his manager, even his co-stars. But he didn't reply. His silence that night would later become one of the most heartbreaking mysteries in modern entertainment. When the news broke, the internet froze. Millions refused to believe it. How could someone so radiant, so composed, so full of grace, just disappear? The hashtags flooded timelines. Hashtag remember you Menglong. Hashtag the smile we lost. Hashtag forever perfect. But beneath the mourning lay an uncomfortable truth. Maybe it was the same people who adored his perfection who helped destroy him. Perfection is a beautiful poison. It promises love, validation, belonging, but demands your humanity in return. Yu Menglong paid the price in full. His final note, left neatly under a small photo of his younger self, said only, "I tried to be everything they wanted, but I forgot who I was supposed to be." It was short, painful, and pure, just like him. After his passing, those who had once envied his life began to see the cracks they had ignored. The exhaustion beneath his eyeliner, the forced cheerfulness in interviews, the trembling in his hands during fan meetings when the cameras weren't on him. He had been breaking in plain sight, but everyone mistook his silence for strength. In truth, Yu Menglong's tragedy wasn't just about fame. It was about the suffocating weight of being idealized. Society doesn't allow idols to be human. They must be forever composed, beautiful, kind, and strong. But what happens when even their sadness becomes part of the show? He was trapped in a paradox. To stay loved, he had to remain perfect. But to stay alive, he needed to be real. And in the end, perfection won. The day after his death, fans gathered at his last filming location. Flowers filled the streets, handwritten letters covered the gates, and silent tears replaced the screams of his fandom. But among all the tributes, one fan wrote something that captured the essence of his story. "We loved your smile so much, we forgot to ask if you were okay." It was a heartbreaking confession from the world that had adored him too much to see his pain. In the weeks that followed, industry insiders began speaking about the silent pressures artists endure, the constant surveillance, the fear of failure, the expectation to always be on. Yu's death reignited conversations about mental health in the entertainment industry, though to many it felt too late. He had lived like a masterpiece painted in pain, flawless on the outside, fractured underneath. His existence was a performance, so convincing that even he forgot where the role ended and where the real man began. Those close to him remembered him not as the celebrity, but as the quiet soul who loved music, nature, and simplicity. A man who wanted to laugh without being photographed, to cry without being judged, to exist without being perfect. But he was never given that space. The irony is that the very smile that made him famous was also the thing that silenced his cries for help. People saw what they wanted to see, happiness, success, confidence, and ignored what he was actually showing them: exhaustion, emptiness, and quiet despair. If there is one cruel truth to his story, it is that fame doesn't kill directly, it starves. It takes your flaws, your doubts, your vulnerability, and hides them until you no longer recognize yourself. And by the time you try to escape, it's too late. They said his smile could light up a room. What they didn't see was how much darkness it took to keep that light alive. After his death, every second of Yu Menglong's life was replayed like a haunting film. His laughter in interviews, his gentle nods to fans, his soft-spoken humility. But between every flash of the cameras, there were moments no one saw. The silences, the sighs, the quiet tears that fell behind locked doors. In the months leading to his final days, the illusion of perfection had begun to crack. Subtly, beautifully, tragically. His diary revealed confessions written in restless ink, phrases like, "I'm exhausted pretending to be happy," and "even when I rest, my mind keeps performing." These weren't the words of a man ungrateful for success. They were the cries of someone drowning in the image that success demanded. Behind every photo shoot, there was a struggle. He would arrive on set perfectly dressed, the face of calmness itself. The cameras loved him, his symmetry, his grace, his almost unreal composure. But his assistants knew the truth. They had seen the way he pressed his temples before the cameras started rolling, the trembling in his hands as makeup was applied. One makeup artist later said, "He always said thank you, always smiled, but sometimes his eyes looked like he was somewhere far away, somewhere none of us could reach." That distance grew larger with time. Fame had turned his every breath into performance. Even when he wasn't acting, he had to act like he was okay. On social media, fans called him the perfect man. Brands called him the flawless face. Producers called him the safest bet. But no one asked what he wanted to be called by himself. In reality, Yu Menglong longed for something painfully simple: peace. A quiet life away from flashing lights, a chance to sleep without anxiety, to wake without expectation. Yet every attempt to rest felt like betrayal. The industry was built on momentum, and slowing down meant falling behind. So he kept going. One of his closest friends once recalled a dinner weeks before his passing. They had met in a small restaurant far from the city lights. Just two friends trying to be normal. The friend said he kept smiling, but there was a kind of tiredness I'd never seen before. I told him, "You've done enough, you can take a break." But he just laughed softly and said, "If I stop, they'll forget me." That sentence became a wound that never healed. His fear of being forgotten haunted him more than exhaustion itself. The world's love was conditional, built on his perfection, not his person. He couldn't risk being human because humans make mistakes. Humans age. Humans fall apart. The irony was cruel. The more he tried to stay perfect for everyone else, the more invisible he became to himself. In his final days, the people around him described a kind of eerie calm. He spoke little, smiled faintly, moved softly. He was there, but not quite present. It was as if he had already said goodbye in his heart, long before the world realized it. The night before his death, the world went on as usual. Fans commenting under his latest photo, praising his radiant energy and peaceful aura. But those same pictures now look different. The glow in his eyes, once mistaken for serenity, now seemed like resignation. At around 1:17 a.m., his neighbors heard faint music coming from his apartment, a piano melody he had written but never released. It was gentle, melancholic, unfinished. No lyrics, no words, just a slow cascade of notes that felt like a farewell. He had once said that music was his only place of honesty, and that night it spoke for him one last time. When the news broke, his management released a short statement. The words were clinical, safe, rehearsed. But fans refused to accept it. They searched for answers, dissecting his every post, his every interview, desperate to find what they had missed. Some found comfort in thinking he was at peace. Others couldn't forgive the world for not seeing his pain sooner. But maybe it wasn't that the world didn't see. It was that no one wanted to believe it. Yu Menglong had become the embodiment of perfection, and perfection isn't allowed to break. In the days that followed, candlelight vigils spread across cities. Thousands stood in silence, holding his photos, whispering prayers into the wind. Fans left messages like, "We would have loved your flaws too," and "You didn't have to be perfect for us." But those words, though sincere, came too late, because when he was alive, perfection was the only love he was ever shown. A director who had worked with him confessed he was the kind of actor who'd reshoot a scene 10 times, even when it was already perfect. He'd apologize for not being good enough. "I used to think it was dedication. Now I realize it was fear." That fear, the fear of not being enough, had been planted early. Success, while sweet, is a poison that rewires the heart. Every compliment becomes pressure. Every expectation becomes a chain. And soon, applause begins to sound like a heartbeat you can't live without. For Yu Menglong, that heartbeat eventually became unbearable. The world loved him, but only when he was perfect. He gave them that, his beauty, his grace, his voice, his everything, until nothing was left for himself. And yet, what makes his story so devastating is that he never stopped trying to make others happy. Even on his darkest days, he sent messages of encouragement to his fans, reminding them to smile, to stay strong, to believe in tomorrow. He was healing others while breaking himself. It's a cruel irony that the man who made millions feel seen and loved died feeling invisible and unloved in the truest sense. The industry moved on as it always does. New faces rose. New stars shined. But the absence of Yu Menglong still lingers like a ghost in the spaces he once lit. His silence echoes louder than any applause he ever received. Those who knew him say his story should not be remembered as tragedy, but as truth, a mirror reflecting the hidden cost of modern fame. A reminder that behind every perfect idol lies a human heart that bleeds, fears, and longs to be seen without filters. In one of his final handwritten notes, smudged with what appeared to be tears, he wrote, "If they loved the real me, maybe I wouldn't have to be perfect." That single line has since become a quiet anthem for those who loved him, for those who now understand that perfection is a mask that suffocates. And maybe that's the lesson he left behind. That love should not demand flawlessness. That kindness should not depend on beauty. That fame should not erase the person underneath. Yu Menglong's death isn't just the end of a life. It's a story of what happens when a soul becomes trapped inside its own reflection. He wanted to be perfect because the world told him that was the only way to be loved. But perfection, as he learned too late, is the most fragile cage of all. And now, as fans continue to whisper his name, to replay his songs, to rewatch his dramas, they do so with tears instead of applause. Because they finally see the truth in that smile, the burden, the beauty, and the pain of being perfect. He lived for the world, but died wanting only to live for himself. And maybe, somewhere beyond the lights and the noise, Yu Menglong has finally found what he was searching for all along: peace, without the need to be perfect.